everybody. Kyle Sasser here, Keller, Williams, St. Petersburg, and today we have Hurricane Michael off the coast of Florida. Last I heard it was around 250 miles off the coast of Tampa Bay here, heading up to the Panhandle. So I know all of our hearts go out to the people up in the Panhandle. Looks like to be a pretty serious storm up there. I did have a question come up regarding the hurricane, though, with a person I was talking with, and they were asking. They said that they were under contract and they were supposed to close next week, and due to the hurricane, they were wondering how that affects the contract. So the answer is on the Florida As Is 5, which is the contract that most residential real estate transactions happen with. There's a section there, I think it's section 13G, called force majeure. And force majeure sounds really fancy, I know, but basically that's just the section that covers what happens with the contract whenever there is something outside of the control of the two parties that affects the closing, that affects the closing. And it lays out what specific events are reason for the force majeure clause to come into effect, and hurricanes are included. And it's pretty much like, acts of weather, acts of terrorism, all that good stuff. So basically what happens is, according to the contract, and this is specific to the As Is 5, other contracts are a little different, but the As Is 5 is the one that you run into the most on a residential transaction. So what it says is, in the event of an act of God or act of terrorism or something similar that affects the closing, all of the timelines are extended for 7 days past the end of the event that was affecting the closing. So in the case of a hurricane, a lot of times what happens is insurance companies stop issuing insurance policies because of the storm. Obviously they don't want to take on a lot more very known risk, so they will stop issuing insurance policies for homeowner, structural, and all that stuff. Flood also stops. Well, to get a mortgage and to purchase a house, you have to be able to get insurance on the house. So if they're not issuing any policies, financing is not going to come through. You're not going to be able to close. So let's take this storm for instance. So this storm is going to be out of here, well, here in the Tampa Bay area, we're not really going to be affected, but let's just say that the storm is out of here by Sunday, but the insurance companies don't start issuing new policies until they've had a chance to assess their liabilities and all that stuff. It usually takes them a few extra days just to kind of, get the engine back up and running. So let's say they start issuing new insurance policies on the 15th. So force majeure clause says that the timelines do not start until 7 days after the insurance companies start issuing new policies. So it's not when the storm leaves and when you can go to Publix and buy a Publix sub, although that's a very good indicator for how bad the damage is. But it's 7 days from the point that the delay caused by the event, which is insurance companies not issuing new policies, is no longer a factor. So 7 days after they start issuing new policies, then you have 7 days after that to closing. If it's with inspections or appraisals, obviously local appraisers, if they're hunkered down for a storm and trying to recover from storm damage, they're not going to be able to get out and appraise or survey a home. So after they start doing their work again, 7 days after that. Now, what if things, let's just go worst case scenario. So worst case scenario, God forbid a hurricane comes here into Tampa Bay, and it's really, really bad. We get like a category 4, it's going to be months. So the contract says that if force majeure pushes the contract 30 days passed, then either party can cancel the contract with no penalty, and the deposit is refunded to the buyer. So force majeure, it's a clause that doesn't become implemented too terribly often. Obviously, whenever there's hurricanes or things of that nature, it's a lot more pertinent, and that's when it gets triggered. It's definitely a good thing it's there, because it does outline how both parties are to handle the situation, and you don't have to go to court to figure it out, which is always a good thing. Some contracts, especially some handwritten for sale by owner contracts, leave that sort of stuff out, which, again, if everything goes very well, no problem. But, if there's a storm bearing down and that clause isn't in there, there is some question on what happens, and it's a lot easier if it's in there versus if it's not in there. So that's force majeure. Leave any comments or questions below. One other thing. So there's another section a little bit further. I think it's a little further down on the contract. I know what it's called. It's called risk of loss. What risk of loss does is that covers what happens in the event of damage to a home during the course of a contract. So the seller is required to maintain the property in the state that you saw it in. Obviously, with the hurricane, damages can happen. Windows can be smashed. Roofs can be very damaged up to the point of needing replaced. The risk of loss covers what happens when damage occurs during the contract. So up to 1.5% of the purchase price, the seller is required to effect those repairs to return the property back to the condition that it was in at the point that the offer was made. If it's over 1.5%, then the seller is not required to make the repairs. And if you think about it, it does make some sense. Obviously, if you have a house and it's under contract and you're selling the house, and a tornado comes down and flattens the home, it's very unfair to be required to rebuild that house to the state that it was in. Just financially, it doesn't make sense, and so the courts believe, and the contract provides in the belief that it's better to just kind of have both parties reset, because the circumstances have drastically changed at that point. So that's the two major parts of the contract that are affected by hurricanes and storms. The force majeure, which is spelled force, that's obvious, and then majeure is Majeure, I think. And then risk of loss covers damages that occur during the contract process. So anyway, if you have any questions or anything, if you're looking for purchasing your own home in the Tampa Bay area, please send me a private message or leave me a comment below. And thanks for tuning in.